So I was browsing the internet when I came across a post about the new She-Ra show, urging people to not become critical of it in the same way that people became critical of Steven Universe. And that made me think of two things. One, the internet is literally melting our brains. Two, people should be critical of She-Ra. People should be critical of every show that they watch. Normally when people are critical of a TV show for children, a common response is, it's a kid's show, why would you even care? My response to that is, one, it's media that I'm watching. That means that I'm going to care about it. It's unlikely that I make a video tackling the entirety of She-Ra because honestly, I watched 3 episodes of it. I don't care about the show that much, but the shows that I do watch all the time, I'm going to look at critically. A quick detour. Critical can mean negative or disapproving, but the critical that I'm using here means analyzing the merits and fault of a work of literature, music, or art. And that includes TV shows, even ones made for children. Part of modern fandom is a tendency to overlook any issues that a work might have. Pretending that the media that you like has 0 faults is dangerous unless you internalize any of its bad messages. Being incapable of criticizing the shows that you like isn't a good thing. It just means that you're watching your media passively. As a viewer, I have to be critical of what I watch. I can rip into issues with shows that I don't like, but that doesn't mean that the shows that I do like are immune from criticism. I can say that Arthur having a character go to a therapist is a really cool step in normalizing therapy, and also say that the animation is still super ugly. I can talk about Odd Squad's diversity while acknowledging that they shouldn't have had their first visibly disabled character be antagonistic towards the main characters of the show. Let's say that you walk into a store specifically for adults. You're unlikely to see many things from kids shows, but if it is, it's one of these 2 things. Shows that aired a long time ago that you watched as a kid, like Mr. Rogers or Sesame Street. Or things from new TV shows that have adult fandom followings, like Adventure Time or Steven Universe. In the past 10 years, newer children's shows that want to be commercially viable have to also aim their audience towards adults. The original She-Ra came out in 1985. How many of the people that watched that show have kids now? These adults get to have a nostalgic experience while their children get to watch a cool show about a lady with a sword. I'm not a business person, but even I know what a good marketing plan sounds like. Also, they literally already did this with Voltron. This is not a surprising development. Are the stakes not higher for media that is directed towards children? The media that we consume when we're young helps shape our entire worldview, and we carry these worldviews around with us as we get older. We gain ideas about what the world is and what the world could be via the media we consume. Criticizing children's media is both easier and harder than criticizing media made only for adults. It's easier because children's media is always telling you what you're trying to take away from any given episode of a show. On the other hand, children's media having intentional meanings stated clearly means that it takes much more work to look into the unintentional meanings. If we're going to talk about being critical, what does that look like for She-Ra? I know earlier I said I wasn't going to do a full analysis of the show. I've only watched a couple of episodes of it. But after writing the first half of this video, I started thinking about She-Ra as a show and had a couple of questions that just wouldn't go away. These are questions that very well may be answered by the show in later episodes, and if they are, feel free to let me know. They're also not things that are proof that She-Ra is a big bad show, like certain people on the internet like to claim. However, as the show continues, there's always a chance that things might get a little bit more thorny. If things do get more complicated, it can be helpful to look back on questions like these ones in order to get a better idea of how good or bad the show is. So Adora is basically Finn from Star Wars The Force Awakens if Finn was actually a magical girl. Kidnapped at birth by the bad guys, they both grow up being indoctrinated into an ideology that they later reject when they see the actual real-life implications of that violence. They both defect and then even have a fight with a former comrade as they question their own decisions. They also both have really cool swords. What might be more interesting is how The Force Awakens and She-Ra diverge in telling their stories. Finn is literally a nobody, just like every other stormtrooper, while Adora is actually a princess that's destined to fulfill a prophecy. The other major difference is how the two pieces of media describe their conflict. The First Order as a group are very clearly Nazis. They're space Nazis. The Resistance, on the other hand, is a vague collection of people that don't like the First Order. They have no specific markers that make them a cohesive group outside of them being against the First Order. This isn't a good or bad thing. It's also something that's not new to Star Wars. The original trilogy also poorly defined what the rebellion was, and the prequel trilogy had the Sith and Jedi as these like mystical, magic, good and evil representations that isn't applicable to real life. So how does She-Ra portray the Horde and the Bright Moon Rebellion? The Horde are industrialists, with their city being massive, green, and sickly. Bright Moon, on the other hand, is the opposite. You see a festival happening where people are partying, and the Horde seems to be trying to stop that from happening. Bright Moon mirrors our conceptualization of Native Americans within the United States. This conceptualization of Bright Moon as marginalized people is helped by almost all the princesses not being white. However, that also makes the Horde the United States of America. You may be thinking, wow, what a subversive political message to be put into a cartoon by a major corporation. But I don't think that the creators of She-Ra were thinking about doing this explicitly when they're making their cartoon. If they were thinking about the racial dimension explicitly, then maybe they wouldn't have picked the two dark-skinned black actors to voice their villains. Let me reiterate, on its own, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Unintentional meanings within shows are nothing new to media, but a story like this, where a white person defects from the military force to help organize a marginalized group, can be compared to another big sci-fi movie franchise.
They've sent us a message that they can take whatever they want. But we will send them a message that this is our land.
Okay, here again are some things that I'm not saying. She-Ra is actually just Jane Cameron's Avatar. She-Ra has a white savior narrative, and therefore it is racist and bad. If you like She-Ra, you're a bad person, and Noelle Stevenson is a bad person for writing it, and everybody that likes it is bad. What I am saying is that I have questions. These questions may or may not be answered by the show. They also might not be relevant, because the show can go in a lot of different directions. But the direction I saw made me think of these questions. How does this show want to interact with the current socio-political climate? Is it going to be a show that talks about platitudes like be nice and don't be racist in an abstract way, or does it actually want to mirror the way that our current society is set up? Is She-Ra a white savior? The show is called She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, but how are these other princesses discussed? Do they become central characters, or do they fall back in importance because She-Ra, the main character, leads the charge? Are the people that even make this show really thinking about these things? Because these are real people that are making the show, are they thinking about US imperialism when they're discussing She-Ra as a show? Are they thinking about how race affects the characters outside of just needing to make the show diverse? Are they thinking about the way that their own lives and their own experiences color the way that they would be able to write about characters that aren't necessarily white women? These are my questions. When something is being branded as subversive, you have to think about what messages they're actually subverting. There are pieces of media that aren't subversive and they're perfectly fine. There are pieces of media that are subversive and have problematic elements too. None of these questions, even if they're not answered in a way that I like, mean that She-Ra is necessarily a show that needs to be written off. However, if other events in the show become controversial, for example, a character of color is portrayed poorly, or She-Ra gets too much attention, these kinds of questions will be relevant again. Alright, that's enough about She-Ra for now. Hopefully I don't have to revisit this topic again. Hopefully the show is cool and fine and everybody loves it. If you have any other suggestions of children's media for me to look at, just let me know in the comments, and you'll be hearing from me next time a video comes out. Bye!